So hi everybody and welcome back to the Unreal Engine 5 tutorial series for absolute beginners. This is video 127, and in this video we are talking about a problem with complex collisions. And the problem is, if you use complex collisions, it is not a good practice. And the reason for that is because complex collision scales with uneven faces very high. And what I mean with that is let's show here a object. This object has, for example, in this case, let's go here fast to collision on this side, and here I have set, for example, collision complexity set to use complex collision as simple. This setting here is really bad, and the reason for that is when we watch now the collision here, complex collision, and it shows us here many lines, and these lines are actually triangles, and these triangles recreate the surface of the static mesh object. And why is this so bad? The reason why it's so bad, if the surface is not flat, in this case it's very flat, it creates less it creates more triangles on the surface if the surface is not flat. In this case I showed you here, it is so flat that it's almost create no much triangles. You see, this is a very flat plane. It created one triangle here and one triangle here, and that's it. But if the surface get very uneven, it start to create more and more and more. For example, we have here one triangle, here one triangle, and then it goes here in this little one, and then here, and so on. You can see it. It goes more and more complex. For example, the solution here is just use not this complex one, use the project default, for example, and then skip this complex here and show the simple collision one. And the simple collision is set to box collision. For example, I use right now here this at box simple collision, and you can see this one is not perfect because we can see it is not covering the surface of the static mesh perfect, like the other one, the complex one covers exactly the surface, but the cost is it creates many triangles. And when we count now these triangles, I have here around 1 2 3 4 here also for 8 12, around 12 triangles, not triangles, around 12, let's say, lines. And compared to this complex here, which has already over doubled or 3 times so much lines, right? And yeah, that's the problem with this complex collision, and you should not use it. I make you one more demonstration why the frames will drop if you really use this one here, because it is not recommended to use this too much. It is more recommended to use this collision settings here, but I will show you first an example where this complex will get worse, because this object which I show you here is very flat, right? The complex one, let's say, like again, this complex one as simple, will not create many triangles here because it's flat. It can cover the most surface with one triangle, like here. It covers this surface almost with one here and one here, and that's it. That's normally a very nice thing. But, and now I make it very let's see, let's go here, back, and I show you now an example where it will get so worse that all the frames will drop just from one static mesh. And here, I go here to the modeling, for example, and then I click here on the sphere, and now I go to complete. Let's scale this here a little bit, and the sphere has already not a flat surface. And when I go here to, let's go back and right click here and edit the sphere, and then I see the static mesh of this one. I dock it here on top. And now, one more note, this modeling tool, careful about this one, it will set all your created static meshes to complex. That's also very important to know, that you should change this complex, not complex, oops, call, sorry, call. And now it set automatically all collision complexity to use complex collision as simple. And right now I try to tell you, don't use this one if it's possible, because when we watch now this one again, look how many triangles we have here to create this surface of this sphere. That's unbelievable much. You can see one triangle here and then goes here around, and then around more than 400, 500 triangles just to create the surface. And you can see the scaling here when we showed this one here. Here we have this surface. It's very flat and it could create these triangles very fast. Here we have a not so flat surface and it needed more triangles to recreate the surface, because it tries really to recreate exactly on the surface. And if this surface here gets even more uneven, it will get even more worse, because this one is not even the worst example. Let me show you what happens if you add, for example, to this surface uneven surface, I mean to the sphere an uneven surface. Let's go here, I select this one here, I go here to, I'm in the modeling mode, and then I add here, where is it, by deform, here, this displacement. Look, now I added a displacement and this sphere has now a very uneven surface. I go to accept, and now look this surface, look this triangles, how many we created. From before we had around 400 and now we have probably around 4,000. The scaling goes up, 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 the more the surface is uneven, right? You can see that's really crazy. And this one goes even more up, but this one is already up. Let's go here and make again one more displacement. And the bad thing is, this is just one object. If you have, for example, in your scene more objects like this one and use complex collision, then your game will probably lag so hard that you can't even play it. For example, in my case, I can't. This one is just loading because let's see. It worked. And now look this here. The surface is even so complex. You can't even see through here now. And these are probably more than, I don't know how many triangles we have. Here in the command prompt here, there are some comments who will tell you, if you know the comment, to count these triangles. But this one is absolute a mess. So, and what is the solution about this one? There is a complicated solution actually, because like I said, this one, if you can use one of this one here, this calculated collision, simple, they are not perfect, so they will be not perfect like this calculated complex here, because this complex is really trying to recreate the surface with triangles. And if the surface is not equal, like we can see here, it still tries to recreate the surface exactly, but the cost is, you can see it, almost 100,000 of triangles here just for one static mesh. And yeah, you have then to go here, change this one here perhaps to other thing. Don't use this one here, let's say project defaults. Let's go rid of this complex here and let's try one of this one here. And the problem is the simple will not work. Perhaps we should go, let's see what that is. Is this better? And let's see. Now this one is also not perfect. You can see the collision is not near at all on the surface. But if this stone is just used, I don't know, if you don't need to really go close to the stone, for example, my character, and if the character is big enough, then there is no problem. The problem is if this stone gets scaled and my character is so small that I would go through this collision without touching these collision lines, then I would not have any collision here. That's also the problem. So you can see this one will not work all time. And that's a big problem. So we can try, of course, here one more thing. Here from the auto generated, this auto convex here. And here it pops up this window. And let's set here, let's see what happens if we set this one very high. Let's say this one so, this one so, and hope it works. And let's see what this is, I don't know. Let's see this one here, what happens here. If we set this one high, of course you can read this one here in the documentation and so. But I will present you in a moment another solution which is more complex than this one here. But it is probably the best solution, but the problem is you will need to learn third-party softwares. And yeah, so now we have here generated this auto, what we used here, this auto convex collision, and you see the lines are very less, and tried to go more closer, better than the other one, because this one is definitely a little bit more closer to the surface. But of course you can see it created from here to here a line, and yeah, and here in between is nothing, which means if you scale this rocket here, or what this is, very high, would go through here. Or yeah, but in general this one is not that bad for a collision. And if it's possible, use this kind of stuff and try this out. But the bad news is here, one more bad news. We have more bad news, of course, and that was what I showed you in the last video. And in the last video I showed you that we can't use in pipes or in holes or anything like that the normal collision crater. And the reason for that is, for example, you want to make a pipe and scale this pipe high, and then you want that your character can walk into this pipe here, something like so. Then all these collision settings here are not working because they will just block the entrance here. That's the bad thing about this one. And I said then, okay, for a pipe we can use, for example, this collision setting here again. Let's click this work, and let's go here. Oops, here's the collision setting. And then I said, okay, use complex collision as simple, because this one will create exactly the surface. But I forgot to mention, this one works only, like you can see, if this it will work on all surfaces. But the problem is, if the surface is not flat, in this case it's very flat because it's a pipe, but if the surface of your static mesh is not flat and you change it later and make it uneven, then it will create a surface like this one here, which will be crazy, and your frames will drop. You can see if I use this static mesh with complex, and it has here over, I don't know, over 500,000 triangles, or I don't know how many they are, but compare this 100,000 triangles or 500,000 triangles just to these green lines here. It's crazy, right? And the same goes here. This one looks less, but if you try to change the pipe here, for example, you deform it, so yeah, that you adjust it to your level and change here and here, all the changes, all the not flat surfaces will create something like that here. Many triangles, and the scale goes up, your frame drops down, and your game will be lagging and will be cost performance. And as a designer you have to be care about that, and or as a programmer as well, or a solo dev, you must check this. And that's why they say try to avoid this collision enabled. I mean this, not this one here, I mean try to avoid this complex collision, because it scales like a rocket. And I hope you understand what I mean with that here. This one scale high like a rocket, and if you use something like that in your level in many places, your level will be not playable and the performance goes really down. At least the frame rate goes down, and you don't want that the frame rate goes down from games. Depends on, of course, of the games, but most games, yes, most player like high frames because they check all-time FPS, and you want to ensure that the frames stay on top and cause no lags and something like that. So if this is not working, and with pipes that is not working, and we want to try to avoid this complex collision, and there is one more way to create complex collisions, and this is a little bit difficult, not easy, and you must learn a third-party software, for example a 3D modeling tool. And the reason for that is you will model all these parts what you can see with other static meshes, and then add them like you want and import it here to Unreal Engine. And there is in Unreal Engine there is a way to convert these static meshes to collision boxes. The bad thing is you have to learn a third-party software. If you are a beginner, for example, that's a little bit more work because you are learning probably Unreal Engine, and then you have to learn now a third-party software. For example, I'm learning also Blender. I'm not an artist at all. I have no clue, but I'm still learning just for reasons like that. And I'm learning also this 3D modeling tool. This is similar, not so powerful. But if you learn this one and Blender, for example, Blender is free. That's why I use Blender. Of course, you can use also Maya, 3D Max, and other applications. And yeah, and there you create then this kind of static meshes. And what I want to show you is something like that. There is a way to rename the static meshes so that Unreal Engine will convert them to static to collision things. And how that this works and all this kind of stuff I will go in the next video, because I will create in Blender a static mesh, and then we will talk a little bit about this FPX content pipeline, because there exactly this picture what you can see here is the reason why you can convert static meshes to collision box in Unreal Engine. And yeah, like I said, that we will do, and you should be aware of that. Try to avoid it if you can. Something like that, try to use this one here, because if you end up using this complex collision, which is good for exactly precise surface but bad for performance, like you can see here, that will break your brain. Not brain, that will break your game, but probably also your brain, because you get so pissed off because your game is so lagging, performing so bad, it's unplayable. And yeah, just try to avoid it and try to use this one first, one of these solutions. If this is not working, try to create this solution, which we are going to learn in the next video, with creating software in Blender and then creating our own custom collisions. And if this is also not working, then the last solution is still use this complex collision here. This will definitely work because this will create the surface. Yeah, that's it for this video. I talked much, but this is very important and can cost many frame rates if you use too much of this one and don't be aware of this one. And yeah, that's why I have mentioned this. And I mentioned this also because there was a comment in the comment section who said I should not use too much collision settings, and he was absolutely right, because yeah, the frame rate is dropping and really bad things can happen, and especially for starters, because they don't know it and say, hey, collision, complex collision is the ultimate weapon. Which what I mean with that is you can use it for almost all it will work perfect. It's perfect nice. And many beginners do this, and later they are wondering, hey, why my game is lagging, why I have frame rates like 30 instead of 60, 90, or even 120. And the reason, for one reason, let's say there are many reasons, but one reason are definitely if you use something like that. All right, enough talk. I think you get the idea, and here I stop. And if you have any questions or any complaints, like all time, or better, even if you have any tips and tricks, write them in the comments. And see you in the next. And bye and good luck.